The gravity of the time is such that every new avenue of peace, no matter how dimly discernible, should be explored. Never before in history has so much hope for so many people been gathered together in a single organization. You will provide a great share of the wisdom, of the courage, and the faith which can bring to this world lasting peace for all nations and happiness and well-being for all men.
So, we are here today on Titans of Nuclear with Lonnie Stephenson, who's the president of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Lonnie, welcome to Titans of Nuclear.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it.
Well, I'd love to hear about what you do on a day-to-day basis, but before we get there, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
Well, I'm originally from Rock Island, Illinois, which is on the northwest side of the state along the Mississippi River, and started my apprenticeship as an electrician back in 1975.
Wow. And what made you want to become an electrician?
Well, actually, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, and I worked in a grocery store and a produce department. And a gentleman come through there, an electrician, was doing a service call for the store. And so I got talking to him about it. I asked him, how do you go about, becoming an electrician? Where do you go to sign up? And he gave me the information, told me where to go, went and signed up. And a little over a year later, I got in the program.
Amazing. Oftentimes whenever I hear about, the statistics about how dangerous different jobs are, firefighter, policeman, every now and then someone's like, actually, it's electricians. That's the most dangerous job in the country. Am I hearing that right? Is that true?
Well, it certainly can be. As long as everybody's following the safety protocols and things, it can be safe, but it's dangerous every day, and you can't take it for granted. You always got to remember what you're dealing with. And so I remember a journeyman telling me, unless you can see both ends of a piece of wire laying on the ground, assume that wire is hot.
Yeah,
there's power.
It's like a gun. Assume the safety's off always. Yeah,
exactly. Always assume that it's energized.
Yeah,
but it can be in the line industry. On top of it, they're out there in the elements, climbing poles, steel structures, every day. So that it's always the same thing. It's a very dangerous environment. But again, I think if everybody, follows the proper protocols, it can be a safe and rewarding career as well.
Yep. So tell me about earlier in your career, what types of jobs were you on?
Well, I was what we call an inside wireman. So that meant I worked on, on buildings, building construction. And I had actually my first job, I was working on a steel mill out in the middle of Iowa. And it was a scrap reduction plant. And very cold that winter out in the middle of the fields. And, there's no heat because heat is generated by the furnaces once it's done, so they really don't have much heat in those buildings. And it was a pretty cold winter I spent that first year, but it really made me decide it's what I wanted to do though, for my career. And then I had other opportunities too, and really while I was on that job, to learn a lot of different aspects of pipe bending, control wiring, wire pulling, you name it. I really did get a lot of experience in just that first project. And then moved on from there, to a few other projects, but very rewarding.
And what's the lifestyle like? Do you have to move from state to state for different jobs, or how does that work?
Well, no, it depends. I mean, we had geographical jurisdiction that our local covered. And so that's where you're, anywhere within that area, which in my local could probably be about 3 hours from the southern part of the district of our jurisdiction to the northern. So depending on where you lived in there, you could travel a couple hours, 3 hours to get to your work site. Typically is probably probably most people within about an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at the max, because you know, the way the jobs are distributed. But the way construction goes, especially, you know, in the union construction, if you happen to have a downside, like once I went through my apprenticeship and I was recognized as a journeyman, that's recognized all across the United States and Canada for that matter. And so if you are slow, the construction is slow in the area where you come from, and there's other work, there's a demand and looking for help in other areas, you can go there, go to work, and you're recognized as that journeyman and get paid their journeyman wages and benefits.
And the journeyman certification, what is that based off of? Is it a certain year's experience? Is it do you have to pass a test? You got to wire something up in front of somebody? How do you get your journeyman?
Well, our apprenticeship program now it's a 5-year program that our apprentices start. And during the course of their study, you know, every year it kind of builds on the year previous. So, you know, it's kind of refresher, and, you know, and they're doing their book work, and they're always tested. When they continue to test, it's based on current things that they've learned, but also what they had been exposed to in the past. And so when you complete your 5-year apprenticeship program, that is considered the same as taking a journeyman exam. Now, some areas, some locals actually do have a journeyman exam in addition to finishing the apprenticeship, and also depends on state. Some states have licensing requirements where, you know, you still have to go get that license in the state, you know, and take an exam probably to get recognized for that license as well.
And what are some of the things that you just can't learn from a book, that you got to be out on the site to really master the skills?
Well, a lot of the work, it is physical. You know, when it comes to conduit bending, for example, you can read a book, but until you've got the tools in your hand and you're working with that conduit, and you know, you really have to learn that on the job. And you know, wire pulling, a lot of the physical aspects of the job have to be learned on the job. And you know, my first day on the job, and I always relate this whenever I talk to apprentices today, very first day, a journeyman had told me, he says, one thing about this trade, kid, is you'll never quit learning. Your entire career, you're going to work with somebody else that's got a better way, or, you know, it's going to teach you how to rig for a wire pull or things like that. Is you'll continue to learn, because every day is unique. It's not like you're going to the job the same day and you're pushing the same button, doing the same task. Every day is a whole new task in itself. And so it's so rewarding.
Yeah. What are you learning? Are you learning how to use new tools, or are you learning the physical technique of how or are you learning strategy, what order you do things? What are the different types of like learnings that occur?
Well, really all of the above, everything you said. You know, there is the different tools, and tools and materials have changed tremendously over when I started my apprenticeship. And, you know, so you're constantly, you know, changing, keeping up with the newest technologies. Like I said, and of course, in the book work of it and learning, when I was there, we were still learning about tubes, you know, test tubes and things like that from the old, you know, televisions. And for control, you had tubes, you know, and now today, of course, everything's all solid state and computerized. And so it's a whole different learning pattern today with what this generation is learning, what they're capable of doing. And we have to continue to be changed, you know, with the industry, or we'll be left behind. And that's why our training is not only for apprentices, we have continued journeyman apprentices too. And all of our training facilities, we got about 340 training facilities all across the United States.
Wow.
And so there's constantly, journeyman training and upgrading as well.
And from when you began to today, if you were to do the same job, wire up the same facility, how much faster would it go today because of the new tools, techniques, technology?
Yeah, it has made a difference. It takes less people on a job, I think, the man hours to complete a task, because of the tools and the, you know, the technologies. And it'd be hard to really equate, how much less it'd be. You still have your conduit bending. However, that's not like before. They'd be required to have rigid conduit, which is a whole different aspect and a little longer because it's more into industrial. And but now there's still conduit bending, and it's still an artwork. To be honest with you, you get people that are good at running conduit, and they'll take pictures of it and show people because they're proud of it. When you look at it, it looks like artwork, and the way they lay out these large conduit runs, or it might be 100 different conduits running in a control room, and so they're all looking nice and parallel and in line. And it really is artwork for those that love doing conduit. There's some people that's what they love to do. They want to run conduit, and they're masters at it.
Yeah, it really is artwork. I've got I subscribe to a channel on Instagram, or I follow a feed on an electrical feed on Instagram, and every now and then you see this picture. It's like I don't know if it's like a circuit breaker or something, or just some sort of like routing box, but you see like the perfect angle, like like the perfect right angle, then perfect right angle above it, perfect right angle above it, and then the colors are perfect. It's just it is artwork. It looks almost like a tapestry.
It is, and that's one of the things we take pride in, is not only doing the job right, but doing it professional. So when you look at it, it's not it's just not wires crisscrossed all across the place. You're training it in there, if you will, and really, like I said, it's something to be proud of. And that's why you're seeing pictures like that, because our members out there doing that work, they want people to see the skill that they've got and how they can, also make it look well, even though, that electricity is going to run through that wire, however it's done. But the bottom line is it doesn't take any longer to really train it in there and make it look professional. And, so you really know what you've done and how proud you are of what you've done.
It saves people money down the line when you come back 10 years later.
Absolutely. The one thing about our trade too is both our linemen and our wiremen, journeymen. You always remember that job you worked on. Whenever I get back to my hometown, get back there a couple times a year, I'll go by a building and I'll this is 40 years later now, and I'll be thinking, I wired that building. I worked on that building when they built it, and it's probably been remodeled a couple times since then. Yeah. But there's that pride that you have in the trade of always knowing that what you worked on is there, and and you can drive by it and hey, I spent 6 months on that job. It was really a good job.
Yeah. Hey, listen, you probably have a better appreciation than most people just for, modern conveniences. I don't think, most people will flip on the light switch since the day they're born, never think about what's going on behind the wall. But you probably have almost like X-ray vision. When you look at any building, any house, anything, you can probably see where the wires are, through the walls.
Yeah. And whenever I'm, wherever I'm at, if I'm in could even be a restaurant or something, I'm always looking up at the ceiling, and looking to see if I see conduit run or wires running. I'll, and see what kind of it, and I'll say, oh yeah, that was installed. I was an IBEW person did that job, because you can usually tell by the craftsmanship, and they really want to make sure it's done right. And but the same thing when I go into a building, when I go into a home, if I'm I always look to see where the panel is. And in fact, when I built the house that I live in now in Maryland, I was going through the model home, and traditionally where I come from, your panel, your service is in your basement, and I'm looking around, and finally I asked the guy, the sales rep for this building that was doing building the homes, I says, where's your panel in this house? And he goes, well, it's out in the garage. I had never owned a house where you had the panel in the garage. But I still don't, by the way. They were able to, I talked to the power company, and they put ours in the basement, because I always like to have access to it. In case you ever want to add, move, or changes, you've got access to it if you've got it in the basement. So they let me locate it in the basement. So kind of.
I bet you get special privileges. Well, so tell me about the union. How does the union work? What does it do? How many people are in it? What's it all about?
Well, we were established in 1891. And at that time, it was, a lot of linemen, both people, linemen that were working on really telegraph lines back then, going along the railroad and putting in telegraph lines. And then, as as electricity started to become more prevalent, working on those power poles, it was about 50% of the linemen were dying on the job, either through falls or, getting electrocuted. But there was about 50% of them were dying. And so that's when Henry Miller, who was our lineman, and he was our first president of the IBEW, when they formed and got together with 10 delegates, the first time they got together in St. Louis. There was 10 representatives from 10 different unions and got together and decided, hey, we need to form a national union. At that time, Canada wasn't part of it, so we were the national electrical workers. And then a few years after that, Canada, one of our first Canadian locals, joined, and so then we became the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. But it was all through that process. It started because of safety and making sure people had the proper tools and the training, and so they could do their jobs. And we always have a saying, you want to go home the same way that when you left home, go to work, you want to come back home and and be in a physical position and to be able to take care of your family and still get the job done. But we've got about 775,000 active and retired members all across the United States and Canada. And we now have our largest construction group, what we call our A membership, that we've ever had in the history of the IBEW. We have over 400,000 members that work on the construction side of the house. And then we have our utility members, well over 200,000 members that work for the utilities themselves. We have people that work in broadcast, telecommunications, manufacturing, railroad, government. I mean, we're probably a little over 50% construction now, but everybody else, all the other branches that we represent, and every branch is unique and very important and really essential to the movement of the economy and keeping everything going, of all the people we represent. So we're pretty proud of them.
Yeah, no, that's pretty amazing. So I'd love to just hear about your personal experience though with you. I mean, how did you rise through the ranks?
I always ask myself that same question quite often. Like I said, once I happened to get in the apprenticeship program, and back then actually, and I remember that journeyman, that electrician that came through that I talked about previously, he told me, he says, well, he asked me, he said, do you know anybody that's in the trade? Do you have any family or friends? Anybody in the trade? And I said, no, I don't know anybody. And he says, well, I'll tell you where to go sign up, but it really helps if you know somebody that's to really kind of speak up for you, I guess, and to help get you in the trade. And so I went and applied, and and I was going to high school. I thought I wanted to be an electrical engineer at one time. So I was really preparing myself and taking, all the math courses you could, the science classes you could, and really thinking I was going to go down that. And I wasn't a straight A student by any means, but I was a B student. And so I think I must have been my grades and maybe some of the classes I had taken must have helped me get in, because I truly knew nothing about it and didn't know anybody in the trade. And so then once I got in my apprenticeship, you're on probation for a year and then you get into the union. At least we were then. A lot of them, your membership from day one now. It depends on where you're at. But we were on a year probation. And then after that, you get in the union. And I happened to be working on a job where some officers, executive board members of our local were on. And so, they encouraged me to get involved, go to the union meetings, get involved in volunteering on committees. And so I did. I started doing a lot of things. We had a picnic committee. You'd get there early in the morning, help set things up. We always had a summer picnic for all of our members to come. But it really got to be fun. It's just once it gets in your blood and you just voluntarily, yes, I'll go help on this. I can help on that. We had a lot of community projects, community service projects we do in the area. Go help out on that. And so I was actually sitting at a union meeting. It was the night of our nominations. I can tell you it was 1984. And I wasn't planning on running for any kind of a position within the local union. It's the furthest thing from my mind. And one of my good friends I was sitting next to, they were nominating someone to be the vice president. And there was one person who was nominated, and they said, "Are there any other nominations or any other nominations?" And my buddy jumped up, says, "I nominate Lonnie Stephenson." And I looked at him, I said, "What the heck is that about?" Well, he had worked with the guy that was nominated, and apparently they didn't get along too well. So I can't let him run, unopposed. You got to run against him. And so then I got elected. And 3 years later, I ended up running for the president of my local and got elected 1987 as president. I did that for 2 terms. Then I was an assistant with our business manager, asked me to go into the local full time in 1991. I went in to work with him as an assistant, worked with him for 5 years. And then when he was retiring, he came to me and said, "Lonnie, I want you to run for business manager." And he had a couple other reps that had been with him, a lot longer than I. And I said, "Well, what about Gary? What about Carl?" He says, "We've already talked about it, Lonnie. You're the next, generation of leadership for this local. We're all 3 behind you. We want you to run."
Wow.
And so I ultimately became business manager, along the way. And then
And how many people are in the local division?
my local, well, when I started, we had about probably 400. When I became business manager, we had about 700. And then we had about 1,100. There's still a little over 1,100 members in my local today, back in the Quad Cities. But so we continued to grow as well.
And then what's the next level up from local?
Well, then I was asked to go to work for the international union as an international rep. They have field reps all across the United States and Canada that go in to assist and train and support our local unions. And so I was asked to take on a position as international rep, and I started that in January 1st of 2002. And I said, and then I end up probably about a year later or 2 years later, I went to work in the district office as an assistant, desk rep, we always call them, with the vice president at that time to assist him in the office. And then he retired in 2010. And at that time, I was asked by our international president, Hill, to fulfill that position as the vice president. So then I did that for 5 years. And then President Hill announced his retirement in 2015. And he asked me to come out here to DC to take on the position as international president.
Amazing. Help me understand, what is the functional difference between what the local union achieves and what the international body achieves? What are what things are you negotiating, or who are you dealing with?
Well, really, and I always tell people this, and I mean it. The toughest job I think I've ever had was being a business manager
at the local level.
Union. Because, they're working directly for and negotiating those contracts, and handling grievances if there's grievances of their members. And it's can be very time consuming and stressful. And at the, so what we try to do as the international, then we try to assist that business manager by having the reps, as I mentioned before, to come in and help, give them some guidance. We do a lot of training and education too for our business managers, and negotiating contracts, handling grievances and things of that nature. But really, they're the ones that's working directly day in and day out with our members. And so, I always say, if it wasn't for our members that's out there working hard every day, doesn't matter which branch they work out of, as I said, and those local union leadership that's doing it, that's where the strength of the IBEW is. It's not with me. It's about our members that are out there each and every day. They're the ones that built this union, continue to build this union, and we continue to grow, by the way. We're very excited about that. We've grown, I think, like 7-8 years in a row now. We've gained membership. We had a little bit of a hiccup with the COVID last year, but we still kind of maintained, and now we're back. Even though we still haven't recovered fully from COVID, we are starting to see our numbers rise, and we're starting to get back into organizing and growing.
Yeah, pretty amazing. How many local chapters are there? How many different? How?
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I think we got about 300 and some local unions, I believe.
Great.
Like
Each about at that
across the
like
United States.
500 to 1,000 mark of people or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. So yeah, that's a lot to manage. So then how does tell me, how does the international union, how do they interact with like politics, like with national politics? What's the connection there?
Well, of course, like I said before, our local unions, they get along legislatively in the state level, pretty much. And then we out in DC, then we get intertwined, of course, in national politics and national legislation. And so we're very engaged in that. We have to be. And, people sometimes say, why are you a labor union? Why are you involved in politics? Well, politics really drives everything that we do. And so we have to be engaged, and we want to make sure that we educate these politicians on who we are and what we do, because some people just don't know. They just don't understand what we provide to our countries, both the United States and Canada, and what the skill level of our members are, and the dedication to their countries and their communities. It's not, we're labor unions and we represent the union, but we're proud to have good relationship with our employers. And through our Code of Excellence, we have our Code of Excellence program. But we know, and I've always told people jokingly, I'd rather sit down at the bargaining table, try to negotiate a contract with an employer that's got money coming out of their pockets, instead of having their pockets inside out because they have no money.
Yeah.
So we want our employers to be successful. And, all of our branches, we want them to be successful, because that also helps us then be successful, to have our members that's working for them, and have good wages and benefits for them and their families.
Okay, so that's negotiating on the local level. What are the issues on the federal level? What are you fighting for?
Well, right now, of course, we're hopefully this infrastructure legislation is out there, bipartisan infrastructure. That would be huge for the, for a lot of that is for the construction end of the industry, but it also affects non-construction as well. But that's big for us right now. The Build Back Better plan, anything that's going to help build the communities that we live in and raise the standard of living for everyone. We support that. And we also, of course, we want to have people have the right to organize. And if they choose to join a union, they should have that opportunity without being harassed or threatened by their employers or being fired by their employers. That's what the National Labor Relations Act was actually designed for originally, was to protect people's right to organize. And so, we've got the PRO Act is what we're working on right now with the National AFL-CIO and all the labor unions. This PRO Act would help, protect those people that are really seeking to have a union, and without, retaliation from their employers. And so we really push hard on that. Obviously, with the energy and the transformation and where we're going, the energy of the future, we're engaged in that heavily, and in those conversations, and how that's gonna, how we evolve from producing energy today and where we're going for the energy of tomorrow. So we're really engaged real heavy in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the clean energy transition is gonna, upend world infrastructure, and you guys are the absolute critical linchpin piece of the whole thing. It's like, how are we going to install any electric infrastructure without your community being the backbone of it?
Yeah, that's true. And everything's going, just transforming how energy is generated. The more wind, the more solar, you still got to get transmission. You've got to, because those, that's usually out in rural areas. You don't see a bunch of wind towers inside a metropolitan area or even solar, it's usually outside, but you've got to get that power from the source it's being produced to where the demand is, and that's in those urban areas. And so that means a lot of transmission.
Yeah, and what about nuclear? What's your take on nuclear?
Well, nuclear is absolutely got to be part of the equation and where we're going for the energy of the future. Nuclear right now, I believe, represents over 50% of power generated in the United States that is carbon free, is produced with nuclear energy. And so, you know, and we have to have, I always say we have to have reliable base load energy. So when you turn that switch on, you know you're going to have power. And that's where energies or nuclear's got to come into play, because, you know, there's times of, you know, the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, and battery, they're starting, you know, have battery backup and supplies, but the technology is not there yet that it's going to, you know, that you can't go days on end without, you know, having a generation coming from solar, for example, and keep the lights on. You've got to have a base load energy, and nuclear is carbon free. I mean, it just makes sense. And the next generation of nuclear as well is small modular units. That's why I think you're going to see the nuclear of the future. And because that way we can, like I said, as long as everything we're moving towards, to just have that reliable base load that you know you can count on as well.
And how did you come across nuclear personally? What was the first point in your career that you got exposure to it?
Well, probably as a third-year apprentice. We've got the Quad Cities nuclear power station is part of is in my local union, and I was working in there as an apprentice. That if I remember right, Quad Cities went online, started producing power, I think around 1972. And like I said, I started my apprenticeship in 1975. But well, I know it was 1978. I was there as an apprentice with the contractor, and we were doing updating and doing some adds and moves in for the security system around the exterior security system around the nuclear power plant. And so our members work, about every year there's outages where they're having the outages and refuel outages and going in and making changes, adds and changes. And so, we get a number of our members in my local that work those outages, and I did too when I was a journeyman. Used to go back there and work those outages, and it'd be because that's usually in the fall or the early spring, and when those outages occur, and there was always a good place to go, for a couple months, and they'll go in there and get everything taken care of and keep them running. So yeah, I got exposed really early.
Yeah. And then, I saw that you put together this op-ed with Steve Nesbitt on the future of nuclear. Just from your perspective, you get to see people around the country. Some people are just kind of exposed to their own perspective, being in a city or wherever they are. What's your perspective? What's the average person's take on nuclear? Is it positive? Is it they don't know? Is it negative? What do you think?
Well, I think people that aren't really educated don't really understand it. You think about nuclear and you might think of something like a bomb. You're thinking of things that, people that don't understand, they really don't. And I think maybe they get some negative thoughts, but once you educate them and they understand that, how the system works and how safe it is. I mean, it really is. It's extremely safe. And people, there's a fear because, there've been, you think about 3 Mile Island, how many years ago was that? But even though that was seemed like a crisis at the time, the design maintained, it maintained everything. It wasn't like there was a whole bunch of nuclear, that got exposed out in the atmosphere and people the system worked, even though it was, there was a malfunction, the system worked. And
it should have been a great story. Yeah, it should have been a great story about how good the engineering is, not this like scare failure. I got to blame the nuclear industry on that kind of, it's like, how did they miss the opportunity to turn that around into a success story? Like, look at how amazing this device is, that even when it fails, nobody gets hurt. That's an amazing story. So it's like, how did the narrative get spinned around?
Yeah, it really is. And that made them after that event. It slowed down. We had a lot of nuclear being built in the country, and there were still several projects that was going online, and but there was some changes that they made from some of the things that they learned and made some changes in the interior, the construction and how things were done, and just to ensure that everything was safe and continue to move forward in the industry.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's as you're right. It really was something that should have been said. Yeah, there were some problems there, but it contained itself. And then you hear the things, of course, like Chernobyl and Russia, but that's a different country, and they
different type of plant, different technology, everything different. Yeah,
absolutely. And so I feel very confident in our nuclear plants.
Yeah.
And the updates. So you said we have the outages all the time, so they're constantly updating and making repairs and replacing cable. For electrically, they'll be replacing cables that were installed 30 years ago, and they're when they're during an outage, they're always updating and making sure that everything's running smoothly and efficiently.
Yeah. Yep. You were also just back to the federal politics side. You were on the transition team. How was that?
Well, yeah, that was interesting. It's I don't know if there's been labor leaders involved in the transition team before. There's it was me and the farm workers, the president of the farm workers was on it as well. But yeah, it was very interesting. Well, I'll give you an opportunity just to, have some discussion and what positions were being filled where, and who they were, and it was really an honor to be asked to do that.
What is your input like? Do you talk about people? Are you suggesting names, or are you talking about topics and questions to ask them? What's your input?
Well, really, helping suggest names, or they'd run names by me if there's somebody, this person, do you have any concerns one way or the other? And then, because internally in the administration, they really had the people that did the real vetting in the end and decided, where they were going. But we certainly, during the process, were able to offer suggestions, and moving forward and all, I think there's like 4,000 or 5,000 positions, I think, that gets filled by the president of the United States. Yeah. And our goal was initially that by inauguration day, to have like a couple thousand of those positions filled. There's still some of them that's still in the process of being filled today, I think. Yeah. And but administratively and getting our main core going, we were directly involved in all that early on.
And do you still help out in some way? Is there still some advice function that you participate in?
Well, yes, particularly when it comes to their energy and climate policy. Our team works directly with the White House and communicates with the White House, and probably almost weekly, as they're continuing to evolve of what they're going to do. We've got some input and some suggestions, or tell them some of our concerns that we have. And so, yeah, we can, continue to work really closely with the administration particularly on energy, but really many other issues as well. So, yeah, it's good.
As we wrap up here, I'd just love to hear your kind of take on the future. Where do you see things going over the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, I think we're at a point that we're evolving in a lot of ways, I think, in this country, and I hope we get to a position that things like infrastructure or something that both parties can agree on and should agree on. You think about the core infrastructure of this country was built, back in the 40s, 50s, Eisenhower, President Eisenhower started when we started building the road systems, and it was crucial. And during his administration, say, we've got to have the roads and the bridges, because I think his experience of during the war, seeing how important it was to have an interstate system, be able to move people. But we got to get to the point, I think, high-speed rail needs to continue to be looked at. We're behind. There's a lot of countries that are, when it comes to, high-speed rail, even mass transit within the metropolitan areas. We've got a lot of room for opportunity and improvement. And I think in those regards, and building the transmission system, like we said, if we continue to move, they're saying the demand for electricity is continuing to grow. It's not going away, it's growing. And especially if we evolve into, electric vehicles and others, there's going to be more and more demand on electricity. And so that's going to mean, I think, some great opportunities for our country. I think great opportunities for the IBEW. Because all the people that we represent and what we do along those lines. So I'm pretty excited about it. And I think if we can, get if we can ever get the political system to really look out for what's good for our country and not get so tied up on the politics. And it's always going to be there, always has been. But really, there's a time you got to sit down and say, let's get this thing moving. It's good for our country. And I think that, personally, I think President Biden, I think he has made that one of his objectives early on. I can work with people. I know we have to work the other side of the aisle to get things done. I think he's trying. And I think we're going to get there. And I think it's going to be good for our country moving forward. And we have lots of opportunities for everyone to grow all across the United States.
Lonnie Stephenson, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And initiate at least a new approach to the many difficult problems that must be solved in both private and public conversation if the world is to shake off the inertia imposed by fear and is to make positive progress toward peace.